Hello lone wolves, and welcome to the Silent Strength Sigma channel. No cavalry is coming. No one's on their way. If you want saving, grab a shovel. That's not just a quote, it's the unwritten gospel of the Sigma. While the world clings to the illusion that someone, anyone, might swoop in with a miracle, Sigmas already know the truth. You're either your own hero or your roadkill. Here's a fact that hits harder than any motivational speaker. In psychology, there's something called bystander apathy. The more people around when you're in trouble, the less likely anyone is to help. Comforting, right? Now multiply that by adulthood, throw in a few fake friends, a sprinkle of betrayal, and you've just entered the Sigma's daily weather forecast. But here's where it gets interesting. While most people freeze, post cryptic quotes, or wait for validation dressed up as help, the Sigma does something insane. They act. They don't wait. They don't complain. And they definitely don't expect the universe to send a sign. Because they've already figured it out, if you're not your own rescue mission, you're just a cautionary tale. This isn't about being cold. It's about being awake. So if you're still holding out hope that someone's coming to fix your life, this video might offend you. But if you've ever felt that quiet, terrifying moment when you realized no one's coming, congratulations. You're closer to Sigma than you think. Let's dive into the brutally honest truth of why the Sigma never waits to be saved. Because they buried that fantasy 6 versions of themselves ago. Number 1, they expect abandonment, so they prepare for autonomy. They expect abandonment, so they prepare for autonomy. That's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. Sigmas have seen people come and go enough times to know the rhythm. Attention turns to distance, promises fade into silence, and the ones who said, "I've got your back," disappear the moment pressure hits. So instead of being surprised when the support system collapses, they already have a backup plan. Actually, they are the backup plan. They don't wait for the fallout to start scrambling. They walk into every connection knowing it might be temporary, and they build themselves to survive the exit. That doesn't mean they're emotionally numb. It means they're realistic. They've learned the hard way that even people with good intentions can leave. Life happens. Priorities shift. Some people love you until it gets inconvenient. Others stick around until they no longer benefit. So Sigmas stop making people the center of their safety net. They build internal systems, mentally, emotionally, and even financially, so they're not dependent on anyone showing up when it really counts. They also don't waste time begging people to stay. If someone's halfway out the door, a Sigma opens it wider. They're not into convincing, chasing, or clinging. Because their peace doesn't come from people, it comes from preparation. They've trained themselves to be so self-contained that even if everyone disappears tomorrow, they won't crumble. They'll recalibrate. Most people panic when they feel abandoned. They spiral, blame themselves, start over-explaining or begging for closure. Sigmas don't. The silence doesn't scare them. It confirms what they already knew: they were on their own. They always were. The difference is, now they're stronger for it. You won't see them ranting online about who did them dirty. You won't catch them throwing shade or tantrums. They just close the chapter, coldly, cleanly, and permanently. Because for Sigmas, autonomy isn't just a preference, it's protection. It's knowing that no matter who walks away, they'll still be standing. Quiet. Unshaken. And 10 times more dangerous than before. Number 2, they know people will watch you sink, then ask why you didn't swim. People will watch you drown, then ask why you didn't swim. That's one of the ugliest truths Sigma individuals know deep in their bones. It's not just betrayal, it's a quiet, passive cruelty. When life starts falling apart, most people won't step in. They won't throw you a rope. They'll just watch, maybe blink, maybe offer a half-hearted, "Let me know if you need anything," then scroll back to their distractions. But later? Oh, they'll have questions. They'll ask why you didn't speak up. Why you didn't bounce back faster. Why you disappeared. And they'll ask it in a tone that pretends to care, but really just wants to avoid guilt. Sigmas have experienced this enough to stop expecting anything different. They've sat in rooms full of people who claimed to care, and still felt completely invisible, not because they didn't speak, but because no one was truly listening. And when things got hard, everyone got busy. Messages dried up. Support vanished. Suddenly, everyone had an excuse. It's in those moments that Sigmas realize something life-altering. Most people don't mind watching you go under, as long as they don't have to get their hands wet. So what do Sigmas do with this brutal realization? They stop waiting to be rescued. They stop explaining themselves. They build quiet strength. They teach themselves how to tread water in storms no one else even notices. And when they make it out, when they survive what no one helped them through, they don't brag. They don't beg for credit. They just become impossible to break. What makes it even darker is how people treat you after you survive. Suddenly, they show up again, full of advice, questions, or fake concern. They ask what you learned, as if your pain was some TED Talk moment. Sigmas don't forget. They remember who left them for dead. And they build boundaries so tight, those people never get close again. That's the difference. While most people are waiting for someone to pull them out of chaos, Sigmas are already planning how to walk out of the fire alone. They don't need an audience. They just need space. Because the next time they start to drown, they're not expecting help. They're sharpening their teeth. And when they rise, because they always do, it'll be with no one to thank but themselves. Number 3, they've outgrown the fantasy that help comes without a price. Sigmas have outgrown the fantasy that help comes without a price. They've watched how kindness is often just a masked transaction. It starts with a smile, a favor, let me know if you ever need anything. But sooner or later, that generosity turns into leverage. Suddenly, the help they received comes with guilt trips, expectations, or strings long enough to choke independence. Sigmas clocked this game early, and opted out. They don't see rescue as noble anymore. They see it for what it often is, a power play. A subtle move to create dependency. To earn access. To plant a flag in your territory. The moment someone says, "After all I've done for you," the mask slips. And the real cost is revealed. Sigmas don't wait for that moment. They avoid it altogether, by never asking in the first place. That's not ego. It's self-defense. They'd rather crawl through glass than let someone hold something over their head. Because when you take help from the wrong person, you're no longer making choices, you're managing obligations. And Sigmas? They don't do well in cages, even if they're gold-plated. They're not ungrateful. They're just unfold. They know real help is rare, and when it's real, it asks for nothing in return. But since that's about as common as loyalty in a crisis, Sigmas don't gamble on it. They build their own safety nets. Fund their own dreams. Clean up their own messes. Even when it's exhausting. Freedom is expensive. And they'd rather pay in sweat than in soul. This is why they don't react like others when someone offers to save them. They nod, smile, and politely decline. Because they know, the interest rate on that kind of favor is spiritual debt. They're not trying to be proud. They're just not trying to be owned. At the end of the day, Sigmas trust their own hands more than anyone else's. Not because they think they're better. But because they've seen how often help is just manipulation in a nicer outfit. So they walk alone. Not because they don't believe in people. But because they've finally stopped believing in the illusion of help without a hook. Number 4, they've accepted that being the lone wolf isn't romantic, it's reality. They've accepted that being the lone wolf isn't romantic. It's reality. There's nothing poetic about it. No moody filters. No dramatic soundtrack. No cinematic walk in the rain. Just the raw truth that solitude isn't a choice, it's often the only safe option. Sigmas don't isolate themselves to look cool or mysterious. They do it because they've been burned too many times by people who talked loyalty, then walked away the moment things got inconvenient. They've seen how messy it gets when you lean on the wrong people, when you trust someone who says all the right things, but folds under pressure. They've carried missions only to realize their teammates were never built for the weight. So no, they don't glamorize being alone. They've just realized it's cleaner, safer, more efficient, better than dragging dead weight, better than betrayal mid-journey. The world loves to romanticize the lone wolf, the quiet rebel, the misunderstood genius, the outsider above the noise. But Sigmas know the truth behind it. It's long nights, hard choices, mental resilience no one claps for. It's being your own motivator, your own therapist, your own emergency contact. It's being so used to walking solo that even when someone does offer help, you question the motive, not because you're cold, but because you've had to build warmth from within. Sigmas don't make noise about their independence. They don't post about cutting people off or complain about being misunderstood. They just move differently. They stay low. They work in silence. And when people finally notice their success, it's too late to ask how they did it. Because that path? Nobody else was built to walk it. They've learned that being surrounded doesn't mean being supported. That having a crowd doesn't mean having a tribe. So they choose solitude, not as rebellion, but as strategy. It's not about hating people. It's about knowing what happens when you rely on the wrong ones. For Sigmas, solitude isn't just a phase. It's the foundation. Not because they think they're better alone, but because they know exactly who they become when they stop expecting anyone to walk beside them. Number 5, they don't expect empathy, they study it like a predator studies prey. Not because they're cold, but because they've learned most displays of sympathy are just self-serving theater. People love to appear empathetic, especially when it costs them nothing. A few nods, a soft "that must be hard," maybe a dramatic sigh, then they walk away feeling like saints while you're still bleeding. Sigmas have seen this pattern too many times to fall for it. So they stopped expecting real empathy and started dissecting it like a science experiment. They don't connect emotionally, they decode. Is this person genuinely concerned, or just collecting gossip? Are they offering comfort, or probing for weakness? They study tone, micro-expressions, the timing between words. They don't assume someone feels for them, they scan for motives. Sigmas have had enough fake concern to understand most people don't care, they just enjoy feeling morally superior to someone who's struggling. This is why Sigmas come off emotionally distant. They're not being harsh, they're being strategic. They understand the value of emotions, but they don't weaponize theirs, and they don't hand them out freely. When someone's crying, most rush in to soothe. A Sigma observes. Who's watching? Who's reacting? Who's pretending to care? They're not sociopaths, they're survivors in a world that treats vulnerability like currency. They know real empathy is rare and quiet. It doesn't broadcast itself. It doesn't make a show. So when someone genuinely gets it, they notice, but they don't rush in. Trust isn't given. It's earned. In moments. In patterns. In silences. Until then, the guard stays up. The data collection continues. Sigmas don't beg to be understood. They've replaced emotional dependency with precision. They don't play victim. They don't chase comfort. They read people, track patterns, and move accordingly. It's not detachment, it's survival. And for Sigmas, survival is emotional calculus. Number 6, they've seen the hero complex up close, and it's ugly. Sigmas have learned the hard way that some people don't help because they care, they help because they want a role in your story. They want to be the hero, the fixer, the one who saved you. But here's the catch, they'll never let you forget it. That kindness comes with an invisible price tag. And once it's been paid, they'll make sure the world knows they carried you. It's not compassion, it's performance. Sigmas have experienced this enough to be allergic to it. They've been on the receiving end of guilt-laced favors, backhanded compliments, and the classic "if it wasn't for me" speech. They've watched people swoop in like saints, only to use their generosity as a leash. It's never about support. It's about control. The hero doesn't want to lift you up, they want to own your comeback story. That's why Sigmas don't chase help, they avoid it. They'd rather take the long, brutal road alone than be emotionally indebted to someone waiting to cash in on their struggle. They've seen how fake heroes twist narratives to make themselves look bigger. You were a mess until I stepped in. Hear that once, and a Sigma makes sure it never happens again. What's worse? Society eats it up. The hero gets praise, sympathy, admiration. Meanwhile, the one who was rescued becomes a side character in their own life. Sigmas reject that setup completely. If someone helps just to feed their ego, it's not help, it's a power play. So Sigmas cut out the middleman. They burn their own fires out. Rebuild quietly. Fix their own wounds. Suffer in silence, not because they want to, but because they refuse to be someone's trophy. They don't want the applause if it comes with manipulation. They don't want the help if it turns into ownership. They'll crawl through rock bottom with bloody hands before they let someone wear their struggle like a badge of honor. Sigmas aren't impressed by the savior act, they've seen the backstage version, and it's full of ego, strings, and hidden resentment. That's why they trust solitude more than self-proclaimed heroes. At least solitude doesn't send you invoices later. Number 7, they know success attracts leeches, not lifeguards. When you're drowning, the world is mostly silent. People vanish. Texts go unanswered. Your pain becomes background noise. But the second you start winning, when the scars have healed and the grind pays off, suddenly everyone wants a front row seat. They clap. They cheer. They say, "I always believed in you." But beneath the applause, they're eyeing the spoils. Sigmas see it for what it is, opportunism disguised as support. They've lived the pattern too many times. When they were struggling, no one offered a rope. But when they started climbing, hands appeared, not to lift them, but to latch on. People want your glow, not your grind. They want to benefit, without bleeding. Sigmas never forget who disappeared when they were buried. And they definitely never forget who resurfaced when they bloomed. That's why they don't celebrate loudly. They don't broadcast their wins or beg for recognition. Because they know what it attracts: clingers, fake well-wishers, the "let's catch up" crowd. They all come smiling, but every compliment carries a hook. Every "I'm proud of you" comes with an unspoken "now, what can I get?" Sigmas stay steps ahead. They study intentions, not applause. They know real support doesn't show up at the finish line, it's there in the trenches. In silence. In the moments no one sees. So when the crowd suddenly appears, Sigmas don't feel validated, they feel warned. That's the brutal truth: when you're winning, people don't come to help. They come to harvest. They want access, not to you, but to the life you bled for. Sigmas build walls for this reason, not to push people away, but to filter out those who only show up when it's easy, shiny, profitable. Because if you weren't there during the war, don't expect a seat at the victory table. Sigmas don't get fooled. Success doesn't attract saviors, it attracts opportunists. And they treat both accordingly. Number 8, they know pity is just superiority in disguise. No one pities someone they truly respect. Pity walks hand in hand with condescension. It's a quiet way of saying, you poor thing, I'd hate to be you. And Sigmas want no part of that. They'd rather be the villain in your story than the wounded bird you think you're being noble for noticing. Because they know when people pity you, they're not lifting you up, they're looking down on you from a pedestal. Sigmas don't chase pity. They don't post sob stories. They don't curate their pain into palatable soundbites for emotional handouts. They don't find power in being seen as weak. They find it in being misunderstood, underestimated, even feared. Because all of those things mean one thing, you're not looking down on them. And that matters more to a Sigma than fake compassion ever will. They've watched pity in real time, the tone shifts. People speak slower, softer, like you're fragile. Like you're a shelf they don't want to break. It's infuriating. And to a Sigma, it's worse than being ignored. Because being ignored means you're invisible. Being pitied means you've become someone's emotional charity case. So they don't show struggle. They conceal pain like a weapon still being sharpened. Not out of pride, but out of defense. Because once someone pities you, they start rewriting your identity. Suddenly, you're not powerful or complex, you're the one who went through a lot. A label. A whisper. A downgrade. And here's the brutal part, most people don't even realize they're doing it. They confuse pity with empathy. But Sigmas know the difference. True empathy sits beside you. Pity stands above you. One makes you feel seen. The other makes you feel small. So Sigmas choose distance. They'd rather be the mystery people fear than the tragedy people pity. They're not interested in being your inspiration porn, your healing project, or your slow clap. They just need space to rise, without being pitied for where they've fallen. Number 9, they're the only backup plan they trust. While others are scrambling, calling for help, or waiting for someone else to take charge, Sigmas are already 10 steps ahead. Not because they're superhuman, but because they never assume anyone's coming. That silence you hear when things fall apart? That's not calm. That's calculation. They've already mapped out every possible disaster, betrayal, failure, and fallout, alone. Not out of paranoia, but because they've learned the hard way, being prepared beats being disappointed. They don't rely on lifelines. They are the lifeline. And it's not some cinematic, lone hero complex, it's necessity. They've watched people fold under pressure, watched promises vanish, support systems collapse, leaders freeze, and helpers disappear. So they stopped outsourcing safety. They turned inward, trained themselves to assess risk like chess players, and taught their nervous systems not to flinch when the world starts burning. Fear? They feel it. But they don't let it run the show. That quiet you see? That's their mind scanning options they've already rehearsed. Where most people start thinking when the crisis hits, Sigmas have already lived the collapse 100 times in their head. So when the moment arrives, there's no panic, just execution. It's not that they don't want support. It's that they don't depend on it. They've seen how fast "I got you" turns into "I'm gone" when things get hard. That's why they don't brag when they handle the storm alone. That's just Tuesday for them. While others look for exits, Sigmas are building one with whatever scraps they've got left. People call it pride. It's not. It's pattern recognition. Every time someone failed to show up, every time a safety net snapped, every time the team bailed, Sigmas paid attention. And instead of becoming bitter, they became bulletproof. Because trust is beautiful. But when your life depends on it, it better be built on something stronger than words. So when it all goes sideways, don't mistake their silence for confusion. That's the sound of someone activating Plan B, C, D, and E. Because a Sigma's trust fund isn't built on people, it's built on preparation. Number 10, they know suffering is personal and responsibility is non-transferable. Sigmas understand that suffering is personal, and responsibility is non-transferable. They don't walk around expecting the world to pause just because they're in pain. They've accepted, often with brutal clarity, that no one owes them understanding, no one is required to care, and no one's going to carry their load when it gets heavy. But that realization isn't sad. It's strategic. It sharpens them. Because the moment you stop waiting to be rescued is the moment you start becoming unbreakable. Sigmas have seen how most people respond to pain: brief glances, empty nods, maybe a few comforting words, then they move on. And honestly, Sigmas don't blame them. Everyone has their own mess to deal with. So instead of growing bitter in the silence, they grow stronger in it. They don't see hardship as a ticket to sympathy. They view it as a personal gauntlet that no one else can walk for them. And because they don't outsource their struggle, they don't outsource their responsibility either. If something fails, they own it. If life hits hard, they brace and recalibrate. No excuses. No victim mindset. They don't parade their wounds hoping for applause. They bandage them up, adjust their posture, and keep going. Because pain doesn't make you special, how you carry it does. That's where the real power lies. That's also why Sigmas are often mistaken for being too cold, detached, or unaffected. But the truth is, they've simply stopped expecting external solutions for internal battles. While others search for someone to lean on or blame, Sigmas train for solitude. They train for storms. They develop the mental muscle to carry double, because they know not everyone who says, "I'm here for you," will actually stay when things get heavy. They're not strong because life's been easy, they're strong because they stopped waiting for life to be fair. They've replaced entitlement with endurance. And in a world constantly pushing the idea that someone else should fix your problems, Sigmas are out there building a kind of self-reliance that can't be shaken, borrowed, or bought. Number 11, they don't confuse attention with support. Sigmas have learned, often the hard way, that just because people are watching doesn't mean they're rooting for you. Most of the time, they're just spectating. Waiting to see if you rise or crash. Not out of concern, but out of curiosity. Some people clap just to look good. Others stay silent, secretly hoping you'll fail without them having to lift a finger. Sigmas have stood in their lowest moments with all eyes on them, and heard nothing but silence. No help. No concern. Just quiet judgment. That's why they don't equate visibility with value. Just because someone sees you doesn't mean they'll show up for you. They've realized that the spotlight, something most people chase, doesn't come with protection. It comes with pressure, expectations, and the risk of being burned by the very people who once cheered. So they stop chasing validation. It's a trap. The more you need people to notice you, the more power you give them over how you feel. Sigmas figured that out early. They stopped confusing being talked about with being cared for. They learned that you can be trending and still be alone. Surrounded, and still unsupported. Visible, and still vulnerable. So they keep their wins quiet. They don't need a crowd to feel worthy. They value loyalty over loudness. Substance over noise. And when people do offer attention, Sigmas don't get flattered, they get curious. Why now? What's the angle? What do they want? Because attention without genuine support is often just surveillance in disguise. They've been watched before, and no one came. They've stood in the middle of collapse with eyes all around and no one stepping forward. So now, they don't mistake engagement for investment. They don't confuse being seen with being safe. Sigmas trust the quiet ones who show up behind the scenes, not the loud ones who show up when the lights are on. To a Sigma, support is silent, consistent, and proven. Attention? That's just noise. And they're too focused on survival to be distracted by applause that disappears when things get real. No one is coming isn't a fear for the Sigma, it's a fact. And it's exactly what makes them unstoppable. While others wait for backup, for sympathy, for a miracle, Sigmas are already halfway through the fire, building exits from scratch. They don't sulk about the absence of help. They plan for it. They don't fantasize about being saved. They become who they needed. And in a world that confuses noise for strength and attention for love, Sigmas are quietly mastering something far rarer, absolute emotional independence. They've been burned by the so-called strong, abandoned by the loyal, betrayed by those who claim to care. So they stopped clinging to the illusion that someone else will carry their weight, fix their chaos, or fight their demons. They learned how to carry double. How to bleed without an audience. How to win without applause. That's not pride. That's survival, with style. Sigmas don't hate the world. They just don't expect it to babysit their purpose. They've accepted that some people may watch them struggle without lifting a finger. May offer pity disguised as help. May only show up when it serves them. So they move differently. Strategically. Autonomously. Sharpened by solitude and fueled by clarity. They don't chase pity, permission, or protection. They rely on foresight, grit, and a level of self-trust most people will never understand. That's what makes them rare. That's what makes them dangerous. And that's why when the world falls apart, when the team crumbles, the lights go out, and the masks drop, Sigmas don't panic. They were never counting on anyone staying. Number 12, they've been let down by the strongest looking people. Sigmas have been let down by the strongest looking people, the ones with loud voices, confident swagger, leadership titles. The people everyone else leaned on. But when the pressure hit and the chaos broke loose, those same people folded like paper. The heroes cracked. The mentors went missing. The protectors ran out of courage, or worse, turned out to be the source of the chaos. Sigmas don't forget moments like that. They burn them into memory. That's why they stopped equating presence with reliability. Just because someone is visible, vocal, or in charge doesn't mean they'll be solid when it counts. They learned the brutal truth: most people who look strong are only performing strength, not living it. They've seen polished exteriors hide emotional fragility. They've seen charismatic leaders panic when the tide turned. They've seen mentors give reckless advice or jump ship when real responsibility showed up. That kind of betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from someone the world told you to trust. So Sigmas stopped trusting easily. They don't romanticize titles. They're not dazzled by confidence or charm. They observe. They assess. They watch how people move when no one's watching. They don't get swept up in leadership theatrics because they know true strength isn't loud, it's consistent. And it's rare. This is also why Sigmas became self-reliant. Because when the people you're supposed to lean on become liabilities, the only smart move is to become your own foundation. They stopped looking for rescue from people in capes. Instead, they check the weight limits of every support system before leaning an inch. And when something feels shaky, they don't complain, they start building their own damn structure. It's not bitterness. It's realism. Sigmas aren't cynical. They're experienced. They've simply seen too many strong-looking people crumble the moment life stopped being convenient. And once you've lived through that enough times, you stop handing your safety over to anyone just because they look the part. So now, while everyone else is clinging to the loudest voice in the room, Sigmas are scanning for cracks. When things fall apart, they're not shocked, they're ready. Because they long ago stopped confusing proximity for protection, and they never again confuse presence for power. Thank you for watching.